RealAgriculture.com presents Farming Forward. Sharpen your soil health expertise with cover cropping, nitrogen management, and advanced grazing. Brought to you by the Farm Resilience Mentorship Program.
My name is Ian McCreary. We farm at Bladworth, Saskatchewan. We're a mixed grain and livestock farm. We got about 20 quarters, so about 3,200 acres, of which 2,000 is annual crops, and we have 600 or 700 acres of hay and some pasture, and then we also preserve quite a few acres of wetlands. I just like to tell you a bit of a story. When I was right out of university, I worked as a grain analyst, and the fellow in the same company that was doing meteorology, and I left about the same time to go our separate ways. And I went for lunch and I asked him, I said, so is this climate change thing going to affect agriculture in my lifetime? And he said, well, you won't notice it hotter, but you will notice it being more variable. The variability will be worse. And so, you know, the droughts we've had the last 2 years, you can't say, well, that was 100% caused by climate change, but the extreme element of it was made worse by climate change. Yeah, nitrogen fertilizer is, of course, a really important input to prairie agriculture. And, I mean, we started out when we first moved to an air seeder with granular nitrogen. In order to get separation between seed and fertilizer, we switched fairly early on to liquid. And, I mean, we were, like a lot of other people, we seed tested by quarter, and you know, I didn't really understand a lot of the downsides of over-applying, so we made sure we had enough nitrogen in the ground. And nitrogen at that time wasn't that expensive. And so we used the soil tests, but we were never short, let's put it that way. Once we realized we had to watch our nitrogen application more closely, watch for where we were losing nitrogen, is that we had all of our land mapped by zone. So the first best step for us was to figure out what the land needed by zone. So first of all, if you're not soil testing at all, soil test. Know what your land needs, and then to the extent your land is variable, look at getting it mapped so that you can figure out what it needs by region on the field. Every area of the field is different, and you can adjust for that. And then because our nitrogen fertilizer was applied by liquid, it was relatively simple to adjust the rate as the machine drove, because liquid you can just put a butterfly, essentially a valve, and some adjustable nozzles in, and it adjusted the amount of fertilizer the drill was putting on based on the prescription that SWOT maps developed for us. So what we've moved from is sort of one rate that we made sure was enough for the whole field, to applying just what's needed by zone, by field, by crop. And we get that prescription every year, and prescription goes loaded in the tractor, and away you go, and the drill adjusts the rates to that amount. I mean, there's really two sides to how this affects your bottom line. First of all, there are some costs. There's some costs to getting it done. There's costs to investing in getting your fields mapped. And there's costs to changes in how you're going to apply it, what your drill is capable of. Most of the drills that have been made in the last 12 or 15 years are capable of variable rate fertilizer application. So then the question is, the additional cost then is primarily on the mapping side. I'd strongly encourage people to interview various players. There's lots of interest in this subject now, and there's companies, in my view, that do it exceptionally well, and there's others that do it less well. So make sure you're comfortable with that relationship. One consideration would be making sure that the player that's doing the mapping and developing the prescriptions perhaps is a different player than is selling you the fertilizer, because there would tend to be some strong potential risks there of their interests being different than yours. And you know, our experience has been that we've been able to cut our nitrogen use a bit just by identifying those zones that didn't need as much nitrogen, and it has not cost us on the yield. If anything, our yields have increased relative to where we were. It's of course hard to know from year to year, because in this country the biggest determinant of yield is moisture, and whether you have enough moisture determines your yields. So the people's claims that soil improves overnight is not right, but soil does improve over a generation. And that's sort of a full generation, and we've seen what can be done. And what we take from that is that's where we start. Now we have to figure out how to keep living roots in that soil more often when there's adequate moisture to make it happen. The key piece is having as much organic matter, as much water absorption capacity in that soil as possible. So a plant that isn't tilled, that exists from the previous year, you can imagine it's a vertical capillary that allows water to very quickly go back into the ground when you have moisture. If you till that dirt and mix it all up, a lot of your winter snows and your very fast rains run off. And so by keeping a healthy amount of refuse on the top and of plant refuse going down and living organisms in the soil, its capacity to absorb water in these more extreme weather circumstances goes up. And that allows more water holding in the soil, and it increases your capacity to grow a crop when you're facing adverse conditions. So I would say soil health is a bunch of pieces, but it certainly has to include a consideration of the living things in the soil organic matter that's there.
If you enjoyed this video and want to continue to sharpen your soil health expertise, encourage you to go to farmlearninghub.ca to learn more.